Hello and welcome to Dada Fest International 2020, Translating Experiences.
We're your hosts, Gareth Linner and Kieran Stamel. Today we're speaking to activist and blogger Emma Round.
These interviews were recorded due to COVID over Skype and Zoom, so we apologise for any effect this has on the sound quality of the recording. Hello everybody, we'd like to welcome Emma today. Emma is a blogger and activist who is based in the Midlands. She's known online as Pseudo Deviant if you want to find her on Twitter, and she's also got a blog which is called Crypt the Planet. Welcome Emma, is there anything I left off? Is there any way you'd like to describe yourself or anything you want to add?
No, I think that's about it. Like, I'm a queer crippled campaigner. There we go. Yeah.
Emma, you have a blog that explores disability in society and you focus a lot on language. So what model of disability describes your point of view?
I use the radical social model, as I call it, or a lot of people who remember the Union of the Physically Impaired Against Segregation from the UK back in the 60s, the sort of language that they were using back then when they were coining the social model. So I'll talk about disabled people instead of people with disabilities. I'll talk about non-disabled people instead of able-bodied people. And you'll find me talking about disableism instead of ableism. And if you want to have a talk about that in a bit and why I make those choices, I'm really happy to.
In your Crypt the Planet blog, you recently said that wearing a label that makes you stand out as disabled, be it a mobility aid, a lanyard or a black triangle, simply makes it easier to be targeted by disabled people and state actors. So do you think a badge can sum up the disabled experience?
As far as I'm concerned, and I think every disabled person who's lived in this world for a wee while will have found that there is a lot in this world that is set up against you that makes your life harder than it has to be. Your life wouldn't be so hard if it wasn't for having to jump through lots of hoops to prove your identity, to keep trying to let people know that as a wheelchair user, you need to use an accessible toilet and things like that.
I find it really interesting that there you are on the actual accessible toilet door. You're the symbol in your wheelchair, and you're still having to say to people, can I use the disabled loo, please?
The issue isn't my being in a wheelchair. Like, the issue is that people look at me and they think, oh, you're too young to be disabled. You don't fit my stereotype of a disabled person. And I'm going to challenge you because of this. And it's these stereotypes of disabled people, which no disabled person ever actually fits. And those stereotypes, they're all held in the eye of the beholder, as it were. Everybody's got a different stereotype about what a disabled person is. And you never fit all of them. And you always, every day, come butting up against them. Like, no amount of having a wheelchair, in my experience, having a badge that says I'm disabled, anything like that has ever made that stop.
We were reading on your blog about the sunflower kind of scheme, which I'd never heard of before, and I identify as invisibly disabled as such. So I often encounter the struggle about if I need to, I won't always use a disabled toilet, but if, for instance, I was disconnecting from my medical backpack, then I will use a disabled toilet. But to anybody else, I'm a perfectly fine and able-bodied bloke walking into the disabled toilet with no reason, seemingly, to be going in there.
In one respect, you can always have a symbol that to you and to a group of people represents yourselves. If invisibly disabled people find solace and community and union with the sunflower, then that is excellent. And I'm all for them using that to connect with one another. But I don't think that we should fool ourselves into believing that it's going to erase those experiences of disableism. Like, I'm in a lot of online groups with disabled people, as I imagine you two are as well, and your listeners. And there's already a lot of, I've seen people claiming that they've seen people abusing the sunflower lanyard scheme and saying, I'm okay, but so and so I saw in the store didn't look like they were disabled. I think they were just using it to get bonuses, to queue jump, to get extra assistance because they didn't want to wear a mask. And it's the same kind of talk you get in the Blue Badge community. If you're ever around a group of wheelchair users for long enough, you'll start to hear some of them talking about how they're a good Blue Badge user, but there are lots of people that abuse the scheme. And there's no, when you dig into it, there's no actual proof. No one's checking the medical history of these people. No one knows if they are. It's just this feeling because those people don't meet that stereotype yet again.
So are disabled people trying to translate the disabled experience for non-disabled gatekeepers, and that's just impossible?
We are constantly begging the non-disabled audience, as it were, like of our everyday lives, to validate us, to believe us, to give us the scraps that we need so we can live even quasi-independently. And I don't think that's right. We shouldn't be begging for their validation. In a just world, we wouldn't be begging for their validation. Non-disabled people would understand that there are disabled people that exist, that there are people with impairments, differences in bodily and mental form and function to the social norms, and that those people might need to use a larger toilet cubicle or might need a ramp without there being any fuss made about it, or shouldn't have to explain why they've asked for an easy read menu at a restaurant. And it's ridiculous to me that we continue to push for this validation, to keep jumping through the hoops, to keep playing the game that's rigged against us.
It's different, isn't it, from the pride flag, which if you think about the pride flag is a symbol of pride,
Yeah.
whereas every single disabled symbol we're thinking of is a symbol that essentially says to the non-disabled community, I'm a little bit crap in this area, so you need to make allowances for me. This is the challenge with disability and translating the experience for our society. In order to get the help, we have to throw ourselves a pity party, not a pride party.
Yeah.
One of the things I was really interested about on your blog is the language you were hearing within the LGBTQ plus community regarding their identity and opposing it or juxtaposing it to the disabled, probably not even consciously, but some of the language you were hearing and how that translated for you.
Yes, what I want to do when I'm in the LGBTIQ sort of plus community is to feel safe and to feel a bit like I found my tribe. But when I hear people using campaigning slogans which centre around I am LGBT, I am not disabled, and using disabled as being this sort of other place, this bad place, don't include us with them. I'm not one of those. And of course, you do find that there are lots of queer disabled people as well. But it's one of those things that I find really hurtful. I also find really telling, I think, that the disableism in our societies, like it's so ingrained that without even really thinking, because I don't think most of these campaigners have gone out of their way to try and hurt me or to try and hurt people like us with their language.
Where do you think the issues around language and disability are problematic?
I think the language we use around disability and disablement is really confusing. We try and use the same word to say an awful lot of different things, and it's not very helpful.
Ableism versus disableism. What's the position on that, and how do you see those two things as being better descriptions of what's happened, or how do you see it?
Disableism's the term that the people from the Union of the Physically Impaired Against Segregations, we're talking sort of Mike Oliver, Vic Finkelstein, that lot, Colin Barnes, some of the biggest disabled thinkers from the UK that really revolutionised our understanding. We'd all talk about disableism. Disableism was also used during like the large protests in the 90s and the like. But in America, which has had in some ways a much more medicalised understanding of disability and disablement, ableism was a much more popular term. And with the advent of the internet and the like, and there being a lot more American bloggers than UK bloggers out there, the American language and ableism seems to have come quite heavily into the United Kingdom. And for me, I don't like it very much. I understand lots of people do like ableism and they think it's a much shorter, snappier term and they think it describes things very well. I think ableism centres on ability and it centres
Yes.
on individual ability. I think the same with able-bodied. Like, I think I'm perfectly able-bodied. I use a wheelchair, but the rest of me works. Heck, I can bend in ways most non-disabled people can't. I don't call them disabled, or I don't suggest they're not able-bodied because they can't do those things. Like, them with their knees that don't bend backwards. Disableism to me talks about and focuses on the fact that disablement, the process of becoming a disabled person, is something that is forced on you, like it or not, by a society that perceives you as a disabled person. Or if you identify as a disabled person, reacts to that identification. It's oppression and marginalisation in the form of, again, like political and socio-economic forces. Ableism and alike, and anything that focuses on the individual and the individual's medical condition being the root of our oppression, being the reason that we can't get into buildings, when it places the blame on me for having Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, for not being able to climb a flight of stairs safely, instead of placing the blame on a society that has trained architects to keep building places with stairs and has set social norms that says stairs are more beautiful than ramps ever
Yes.
could be, which is ridiculous to me.
Yes.
I think that's really unhelpful. I think there will always be people with impairments. There will always be people with bodies and minds that go against the social norms of the time, which I must say are highly subjective. What is a disability one day and what isn't a disability the next day does vary quite heavily.
Emma's comment before about architects and sexy staircases being a priority over ramps, and then I started drifting off briefly, momentarily, and I apologise, into thinking, oh, what's a sexy ramp? And then almost immediately remembered I've been to the Vatican where there was a very sexy ramp that went all the way up to the top of the Vatican. That actually took you around the building. I mean, it was quite incredible. And I suddenly thought, okay, there are sexy ramps and architects could do something about it.
Well, thank you so much, Emma Round, for your time. It's been delightful to chat to you. And we look forward to catching up with you one day at a socially appropriated distance.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to chat to you both.
This podcast was produced by A Little Commitment and edited by Pete Gledall.
This was a Dada Fest 2020 commission.